Yes, I'm an actor by trade now, so I can't claim to be able to save the world, but I will make its demise much more tragic. I want to start with a game. I want you to look at this, and I want you to look at square A and square B. And I want a show of hands for how many people think square A is darker than B. It's not a trick question. Maybe it is a trick question. And now show of hands for how many people think B is darker than A. We have a few. And how many people think they're the same? Good, a few there. They're actually exactly the same. The reason I'm playing this game is because I want to take a starting premise. We look with our eyes, but they are merely lenses we see with our brain. And our brain takes away and fills in some really interesting stuff. So because of the way that was set up, your brain knows it's in the shade of the sort of standing round thing and adjusts automatically to say, well, it must be darker, but because it's in the shade, the squares around it are. But they're actually identical. So let's take that as a starting premise, and let me show you some more things. Keep them coming. Do you see anything? It's bus stops. There's a little seat. Anyone? Do you see it now? These are all ways of preventing homeless people from resting in public places. It is called defensive architecture. Last it was referred to was in medieval times when people had castles. You would have a moat with water in it, you would have a drawbridge, you would have arrow slits through which you would shoot. And that's the last context in which we had defensive architecture, essentially. And it's back in the last 20 years, and it is the city defending itself from people. So think about that. Soft bodies, round, supple, soft bodies against hard metal spikes in a city that no longer welcomes them. They're everywhere. They are in London, they're in New York, they're in Paris, they're in all the big metropoles. They're here in Germany, I'm afraid. There was a store chain in Hamburg that installed sprinklers that would come on in the middle of the night and drench anyone that happened to be sleeping outside. Because presumably people sleeping outside your shop at night is really quite not on. The pavement belongs to you, the facade of the shop belongs to you. Why does it happen? I have a theory. I have no way of knowing, really, but I have a theory, and I think it is related to spending. I think if you are confronted with actual poverty, with destitution on your way into a shop, it will make spending money on shit you don't need much harder. That's my theory. And so we get to an example that actually was in my neighborhood and on which I wrote. And I had a lot of replies. And they were roughly split in 3 camps. There was 30-odd% of people that were outraged by these spikes. The next one, please. That's them. They're actually a couple of blocks away from where I live. So about a third of people were outraged with these spikes. About a third of people thought they were an absolutely brilliant idea. And I don't necessarily want to engage with that third, because I don't think we have a common language yet. But a third of people thought they were harsh, but could also see that, well, you know, going into your building, you have to look at it from the point of view of the people staying there. They don't want to see homeless people sleeping on the doorstep. And I think connecting the dots in both the way the law victimizes the poorest, in the way metrics ignore the poorest. There are no official statistics. We rely on charities to tell us how many people don't have a home in this country. And I can tell you how many they are. According to BAGW, homeless people in Germany will reach the number of 380,000 by 2016. It's in 2 years' time. Germany has the most uneven wealth distribution in the Eurozone. 20% of people in Germany have no assets at all. 10% have more debt than they have assets. And so what I'm trying to impress on you, as someone who did sleep in the street, is that we are all a lot closer to that level of poverty than we think. We are really a couple of pay packets away from it. And this is because, coming back to spending, we are encouraged to live on future earnings, not on current earnings. We are encouraged to live on earnings that we haven't earned yet. And so if anything happens, any illness, any relationship breakdown, any health issues, any death, if anything happens that stops those future earnings from coming in, we are already bankrupt. And that's an important point to take away. There's a false dichotomy that often goes with this. I'm from Greece originally, and Christine Lagarde last year made this speech, or it was an interview, I think, and she said, well, the Greeks should really stop moaning because their poverty is not that bad. There are much poorer people in Africa, which is, of course, right. So if the money we weren't getting was going to Africa, I'd accept that, but it's not. You know, there may be worthy causes. Fine, take that money and give it there, but it's not going there either. It is simply a way of comparing misery and saying your misery is not as bad as their misery. But when I was in Athens 3 months ago, and a large supermarket closed its door, and a number of elderly women came from the surrounding streets, dressed all in black. They looked like a chorus from Trojan women, and climbed into the bins to find food. Well, their poverty is pretty real to them, I have to tell you, because this comparison only works if you reduce people to statistics. To the family that died last week in Greece, because they couldn't feed themselves, quite literally. So they died of malnutrition, like 2 babies and a mum. To the family that died there last year because they were burning rubbish in their fireplace because they couldn't afford fuel. To the 120 roughly people that die in London every winter because they freeze, their poverty is as real to them as anyone in Africa, I assure you. Fabian Brunsing, a German artist, did a sort of protest piece on this. So this is an art installation. It's this bench that you have to put 50p in order for the spikes to retract. And after a certain time, you start getting a beeping sound, and it means you have to put more money in it, or the spikes will come back up. Sadly, Chinese officials from the Shandong district thought this was an excellent idea, and they've now installed them in many parks over there. So maybe So, what can you do? Start to see rather than look. Go around your city, if it's Bonn, if it's not, wherever you go home to tomorrow, for the next 24 hours, and look around the city in the active frame of mind of where would I sleep? Where would I rest? What would I eat? Where would I go to the toilet? Showers cost £5 in London to go to a rail station and take a shower. It cost me much more to keep myself clean and looking functional because I was working while I was homeless. It cost me much more than it would have cost me to put down a deposit and the first month's rent for a flat, but I never had it in one go. I only had it a £5 at the time. Being poor is very expensive. I know that's counterintuitive, but it's true. Buying small packets of everything is expensive. Having an electricity meter rather than paying by direct debit is expensive. It's all expensive. Once you're down there, you just spiral down. It keeps you underwater until you can't breathe anymore. I will close because I know we're running over. Why am I mentioning this in the context of this talk? Because I think it's much easier to obsess with all the external stuff than to make the fundamental internal changes that we all need to make. And so, of course, action on carbon emissions is key. Alternative fuel, key. All of it, incredibly important. But actually, the basic thing inside us is that lack that we have, that we need to fill by replacing rather than repairing, by upgrading even when we don't need it, and by refusing to share. We refuse to share with each other. We refuse to share things, cars, space. We refuse to share with other human beings. We certainly refuse to share with other living creatures. And that, I think, is the simpler but more difficult adjustment that we need to make. Infinite growth is a myth. The trickle-down effect is a fairy tale. Real resources are physically limited. Land, water, food, skill. They have physical limitations. For every person that grabs more than their share, someone goes without. It is as simple as that, I'm afraid. That's all I have to say. Thank you.